In a lot of ways, the space industry in the U.S. is rooted in the South.
The Marshall Center, located at Huntsville, Alabama, is the newest and largest installation of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration.
Cape Canaveral, Florida. Man in space.
The region is home to many of the nation's legendary NASA facilities. And as NASA works towards returning to the moon with the Artemis program, our space history is inspiring new generations.
You don't know the impact that's going to have on somebody. The astronauts, the innovators, the engineers, the scientists of today.
But in North Carolina, two important sites from the space race remain relatively unknown.
I have been past it my entire life and never noticed it.
And I've driven past the sign dozens of times and never realized what it was.
I'm Anissa Khalifa. This is The Broadside, where we tell stories from our home at the crossroads of the South. This week, Jared Walker explores how a couple of special places in North Carolina quietly accelerated the space race.
You work hard to build a future for your family. But what if something happened to you? With term life insurance from Corebridge Direct, you can help protect their financial future for under $1 a day. Customize your policy to assist you with your mortgage, tuition, or everyday expenses. Get a free quote today at CorebridgeDirect.com. That's CorebridgeDirect.com. Subject to qualification, not available in all states. Details and disclosures at CorebridgeDirect.com. Multiple carriers represented.
I'm Cliff Bumgardner, and I'm a producer with PBS North Carolina.
Cliff, like me, is a casual space nerd. He's fascinated by the science and the stories behind America's effort to explore the cosmos. But until recently, he didn't think that had much to do with his home state.
There's a handful of the places that get talked about, whether it's Houston, Cape Canaveral, Alabama, whatever. But for the most part, nobody would think about North Carolina or, this region as being space adjacent.
But that worldview was turned upside down last year when he began working on a short film for PBS North Carolina and Our State magazine. It was all about a piece of space race history hiding in plain sight.
If you walk down Franklin Street in Chapel Hill, you will see one historic marker high up on a sign that says something about NASA coming to Chapel Hill. I have been past it my entire life and never noticed it, and I think a lot of people have a very similar experience. But what that means is that for more than a decade, NASA astronauts came to North Carolina, specifically to Moorhead Planetarium at UNC Chapel Hill, to train in celestial navigation.
So John Glenn, Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong.
All the big names. And they came in secret because if you think back, this was the Cold War and America's space program was highly secretive, and what these guys were up to and where they were had to be a state secret. And that's part of the reason that for a long time nobody knew about it until it was, I guess, declassified or whatever the procedure would be that it became public knowledge again.
So here's the $1 million question. Why on earth would they pick Chapel Hill, North Carolina as the site for something like this?
It was on the flight path. So if you think about where the astronauts were, most of the time they would be either in training in Florida or in Texas, or they'd be up in DC. Chapel Hill is kind of in the middle of that triangle.
So it's just logistically easy to get to.
It was logistically easy to get to. It was, at the time, a sleepy, small town that they could come into, wouldn't raise a lot of alarms, wouldn't have a lot of attention if people did find out they were there. So in a lot of different ways, it just sort of fit.
But beyond convenience, UNC Chapel Hill was also home to a rare piece of technology.
Morehead Planetarium was one of the first, I believe it was the first planetarium on a college campus anywhere in the nation. And it was incredibly well funded by John Motley Morehead, who had put in world-class technology unlike anything else that people had seen before in the planetarium. So they had amazing technology to actually be able to do the kinds of training that NASA would need.
So what exactly was the training that they underwent?
So the astronauts were training on what's called celestial navigation, and I will not pretend that I understand every detail of that. However, the gist is it's using the stars to navigate. So I think we sometimes forget just how, by today's standards, basic the technology was that allowed people to go to the moon and allowed the entire early space program to exist.
None of the satellites we have today were online back then.
None of that.
These were literally trailblazers.
And I mean, your phone today has many, many times the technology that was available to NASA back in the 50s and 60s. So they had to use the stars to actually align their navigational system. If their navigational system went out during a space flight, if they had an emergency, they would actually have to use the stars to know where they were in space, because if you're in space, there is no up or down. You are tumbling at several thousand miles per hour through space, and they would actually have to use the stars to align themselves.
In fact, Cliff says early astronauts used the stars to align their navigational systems on every mission. So this training wasn't just in case of emergencies.
So they would sit in the theater, the full dome theater in Morehead Planetarium, and look up, and they could project star patterns on the dome inside the planetarium. This is the technology that they needed, a world-class star projector that could actually project what they would see in space as accurately as possible. And they had made these very basic but effective chairs originally built on barber's chairs that would mimic the capsule that they would be sitting in, and they would have cardboard tubes that mimicked the outline of the window they would be looking through. So picture an astronaut in a spaceship where they are literally looking out the window like you would in your car to navigate, but they're looking at the stars as they hurtle through space at thousands of miles an hour. That's what they had to simulate using cardboard tubes and a barber's chair in Morehead Planetarium. But that was the training and technology that allowed them to navigate.
Proto VR.
Exactly. Yeah, it actually looks like, if you go to Morehead today, they still have in their archives some of the original trainers, and they have a lot of photos of the trainers that you can see. And it does look like primitive VR. It's really funny to see.
So did they ever have to use this during an emergency? Because you said that they would regularly calibrate instruments in space, but was there an instance where this actually was used to save a mission or to avert disaster?
There are quite a few instances where there was an emergency that required them to use this training. It happened multiple times throughout different eras of the space program. Probably the most notable is the Apollo 12 mission, which is a mission that you don't really hear about.
No, Apollo 13 is the one everyone, they made the movie about.
Exactly.
They almost lost the crew.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we have a problem.
Apollo 11, also a very famous mission.
So there's a foot on the moon, stepping down on the moon.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
But Apollo 12 kind of comes in between, and nobody's really paying attention to it. But Apollo 12 was actually struck by lightning twice on the launch pad.
What?
As it launched, which completely knocked the navigational systems offline.
We fact-checked this, and if you listen to a recording of the mission's communications, you can actually hear the astronauts laughing, almost hysterically, after they realized they'd narrowly escaped a catastrophic disaster.
I never saw somebody light up so many lights up there I couldn't read them all. There was no sense reading them because
Now, in the moment, they were able to get things back online. They were able to get into space. It was okay. They continued with the mission. It was successful. But coming back, they had to use the training that they got at Moorhead here in North Carolina to realign their navigational system and actually get safely back to Earth. That's the key, is it's not just about going to space. It's about getting back safely. And that's what the training allowed them to do.
Thank your lucky stars for that. Moorhead Planetarium, with its giant dome, still towers over Chapel Hill. But it's by no means North Carolina's only physical connection to the space race.
They're pretty rare. Only maybe a half a dozen or so were built. And so to have this little piece of hidden space history here, it's a real treasure.
And you, yes, you, could own part of it, if you have a few $1 million lying around. More on that after a short break.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Space has always been a huge passion of mine. I grew up watching the space shuttle missions, and I had an uncle who lived near Orlando, so we could actually watch the shuttle launches from his driveway.
Brett Tingley is the managing editor of Space.com, an outlet that covers space exploration, innovation, and astronomy news. And he just happens to be based in Asheville, North Carolina. So I called him up to find out more about the state's surprising ties to the space industry.
People don't associate Western North Carolina with space and spaceflight. But in 2024, a piece of a SpaceX capsule fell right here in Asheville. It was about the size of a car hood, and it fell on a glamp ground, a luxury campground, just about 20 minutes outside of Asheville. And I got to go see this thing, and it was wild. Bolts and shredded carbon fiber everywhere. So it's interesting how even the modern space race is reaching out and touching Western North Carolina in unexpected ways.
But Brett recently reported on a much older and more enduring reminder of the region's space history. A sprawling 200-acre compound located near the tiny town of Rosman.
Yeah, it's called the Pisgah Astronomical Research Institute. And for kids growing up in Western North Carolina, it's pretty familiar because for years they've hosted field trips and educational outreach programs and camps. And it's funny because I've been hiking and camping in the area my entire life, and I've driven past the sign dozens of times and never realized what it was.
But a few years ago, Brett started reading up on this facility's fascinating history. The nonprofit Pisgah Astronomical Research Institute, or PARI for short, has owned the facility since 1998. But that's just its latest iteration.
It was first built in 1962 as part of a network of NASA ground stations. It was designed to track satellites, communicate with satellites, and at the time, it was one of the most advanced ground tracking facilities in the world.
At its heart were two massive radio telescope antennas that still work today.
These large white dishes just rising up out of this valley, pointing skyward. And so it's these two large antennae that are able to gather so many different radio signals coming from orbit. So they're called 26 West and 26 East, because they're 26 meters wide.
For reference, 26 meters is about the length of 2.5 school buses.
And so it's these two radio telescopes that make this facility special and enabled it to do the work that it did. Yeah, the Rosman Station really laid the groundwork for our weather satellites, our GPS satellites that run our navigation apps, your satellite television, your satellite radio. I mean, none of that would have been possible without these early satellite experiments that Rosman was responsible for.
But like all cutting-edge technology, Brett says eventually the facility became obsolete, which led to its strangest and most secretive chapter in the 1980s.
And that's when the Department of Defense, specifically the National Security Administration, came in and took it over, and then it became a spy facility.
Not much is known about this period. It's highly classified. But researchers have deduced that its position in the southern U.S. made it valuable during the Cold War, and it likely was used to intercept satellite communications between Cuba and the Soviet Union. But why did NASA build this thing in western North Carolina in the first place?
One of the reasons it was chosen for this location is because of the radio quiet conditions. Especially, 60 years ago when it was built. This is a very quiet corner of Appalachia. And so you find these throughout the mountains, but particularly in Appalachia, because we have these deep valleys that are kind of sheltered on all sides by mountains.
Brett saw this firsthand during a recent tour of the facility.
And so when you walk in or drive in to the grounds at Perry, immediately that's what you are struck by. You're down in this bowl surrounded on all four sides by the Appalachian Mountains. It's breathtakingly beautiful. You wouldn't expect that from a space facility. I've been to many different NASA facilities, many different Department of Defense facilities, and you expect them to just be these kind of concrete slabs with industrial buildings, antenna everywhere. But when you walk into this place, it looks like a resort. I mean, it looks like a postcard.
And it's that beautiful view that has some people at Perry worried, because the campus is now up for sale.
Attention prospective property buyers. If you're looking for something unique in western North Carolina and you have quite a bit of cash, check this out.
I've been in the commercial real estate business 46 years, and I can tell you this one is the most interesting piece of property that we've ever had the privilege of working on.
One thing they told me is that they really don't want to see this place turned into luxury cabins, rental properties.
But Brett says for the low price of $30 million, you could own an incredibly rare piece of space race history.
It's not your usual piece of real estate. Not only is it quite expensive, but you've got all these specialized facilities on the site. And so hopefully nobody wants to come in and just tear them all down, but I could imagine that being a very expensive process. There are tunnels leading from the various buildings, connecting one another and connecting to the radio telescopes. It's not a turnkey place. So whoever comes in is going to have to be serious about whatever they want to do with it, which hopefully will be continuing the science that they do there.
Science learning programs like the ones that take place at Moorhead Planetarium in Chapel Hill, where director Cliff Bumgardner recently brought his camera for PBS North Carolina.
One of the things that excited me most about this story when we were going into it was the fact that you can still go touch, experience, see a lot of the real objects and spaces that were used in this training. The Full Dome Theater, which they have, which is still a world-class theater to this day, is the same theater that was used back then, so you can sit in the same spot where the astronauts sat and see a star show. They actually have star shows that mimic to a degree what the astronauts would have seen. They don't put you in the barber chair, but you can kind of see, you get an estimation and an idea of what the astronauts may have seen. And they've expanded, of course, to all sorts of scientific programming outside of the theater and camps and that kind of thing. But it really is a special little place on the campus.
After my conversation with Cliff, I wanted to get a look at this for myself, so I drove over to the planetarium to catch a show.
Excuse me. Looking for the entrance to the dome?
Yeah, this is the entrance.
Oh, can I go in?
Yeah. Is it just you or do you have...
Staring up at the stars at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right where Neil Armstrong once sat, I couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder.
When we gaze at the stars on a calm summer night, we perceive a beautiful, peaceful, and orderly.
And Cliff says ultimately, that's why preserving these sites and their histories is important.
The space race is a time that we look back to with a lot of not just nostalgia, but awe of what we accomplished. I don't know that we look ahead with that same awe these days. And in order to create that, you have to have places and spaces and stories and history that remind you that it's possible, that this was human beings. This was guys in a metal capsule navigating out of the window as they fell out of the sky. We want to keep that awe alive for the future, and I think you do that through embracing these stories and this history.
3, NASA is currently in the process of returning to the moon with the Artemis program. Artemis 2 is set to launch in February. Among its crew will be NASA astronaut Christina Cook, who grew up watching the stars on the North Carolina coast. If you want to check out Cliff Bumgardner's short documentary film about Moorhead Planetarium for PBS North Carolina and Our State magazine, we've dropped a link in this week's show notes. There, you'll also find Brett Tingley's recent article about Perry at space.com. This episode of The Broadside was produced by Jared Walker and edited by Charlie Shelton Ormond. Our executive producer is Wilson Sayre. This episode featured archival recordings from NASA and CBS and a news clip from WLOS in Asheville. The Broadside is a production of WUNC News in North Carolina and is part of the NPR network. If you have feedback or a story idea, you can email us at broadside@WUNC.org. If you enjoyed the show, leave us a rating, a review, or share it with a friend. I'm Anissa Khalifa. Thanks for listening, y'all. We'll be back next week.
TV has thousands of free movies and TV shows.
What? This is the mindset.
Free.
This is the mantra.
Free.
This is the mindset.
With movies like Joe Dirt, Pixels, and 50 First Dates. This is awesome. And TV shows like Survivor, SpongeBob SquarePants, The Fairly Odd Parents, and Ghosts. Pluto TV is always free.
Huzzah!
Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.
You're welcome.